Welcome Yamhill County to Speaking Frankly. I'm your host, Howie Harkema, and our tagline is, "And how we doin'?" And today I have a wonderful guest. He's been with us a couple times before, and he's always great. Russell Mark, who is the president and CEO of Juliette's House. Welcome, Russell.
Thank you, Howie. Thank you very much for having me back.
Oh, this is your third time, so you're old hat at this now. So first of all, what is Juliette's House?
We are a 22-year-old organization that works with kids who have been abused or neglected. Technically, we're called a Child Abuse Intervention Center.
Okay.
We're a nonprofit, 501c3, and we opened our doors in the summer of 1997. Mm-hmm. And really, we're a grassroots organization. We grew up from school counselors and law enforcement officers, doctors and business people in the community that said, we've got a situation where kids are being abused, and we'll take them to the police department, we'll take them to the hospital, we'll take them to the DHS office, and every time they get re-traumatized having to tell their story all over again. So we were part of the early movement to create these centers around the country where you bring the child, and then law enforcement and DHS and doctors that need to work with these kids and examine these kids come to them, and that child only has to tell their story one time, really. And it's an incredibly effective program. In the state of Oregon, we have 21 centers. I have the privilege of being the chair of the board of the Oregon Network of Child Abuse Intervention Centers.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And we do a lot of work in Salem with the legislature, particularly right now, trying to advocate for a number of child welfare issues, but more than anything, direct support for the work that we do in these centers. It's a state mandate. Eventually, the hope is that every county in the state will have a center of its own. Right now, some of our centers have 3 and 4 counties, which is a lot, particularly the more rural communities. And we're also finding that in those rural communities where resources are even more scarce, it's really hard to find that support. They can't raise the money that they need to fully operate and to help these kids and these families. So that's why we've been working with the legislature to find some more money to support this work. The thing that has really been fascinating to me is really digging into the studies and understanding the link between untreated child abuse and so many social ills that we deal with.
Yes.
Whether it's bad behavior in schools or school dropouts or substance abuse early on, unwanted pregnancies.
Right.
And then, of course, an issue close to you is homelessness.
Right.
We know that a high percentage of people living on the streets were abused as kids, and nobody intervened.
And how many of the percentage do you think actually come to grips with that?
Well, those on the street, very few. That's why they're there. And of course, child abuse then is just sort of the trigger that began all of this spinning out of control in their life.
Right.
And frequently substance abuse and other issues. But it also triggers all kinds of mental health issues, depression, bipolar disorder. And we know that a lot of chronic health diseases, even high blood pressure, diabetes, all of this is due to the trauma that they experienced as a child, and nobody intervened.
Right.
Which is one reason I think I've told you that less than 10% of child abuse cases are actually reported.
Right, and that's unbelievable to me.
It is, but you stop and think. Kids don't want to, if it's a family member that they love, they don't want to talk about it.
Right.
There's a lot of fear. There's still a lot of social stigma. I've talked with parents that say, we don't want anybody to know that our child is coming to Juliette's house. So one of our goals is to remove that stigma from them so that they know you coming to Juliette's house was the right thing to do. Feel good about that. Because now we're bringing together all of these resources. And not just at Juliette's house. We work collaboratively with a family place and Mid-Valley Parenting and so many great organizations throughout this community, all trying to build this safety net that says, okay, a child is in trouble, a family is in trouble. What can we do to help them before a line gets crossed? And if a line gets crossed, there's still a whole lot of resources out there to help them. And so I was saying last night at an event for the McMinnville Area Community Foundation, it is so wonderful to live in a community where organizations work so collaboratively together. The business community is behind us. The elected officials are behind us. I've never lived in a community that is this supportive, particularly around children. And now one of our big goals is really educating the community at a high level. What does child abuse look like? What can you do to stop it? And how do we as a community address these issues before they ever happen?
Right.
So we've implemented, as you know, many education programs. We have 5 prevention education programs that we work with. So many of those are school-based. We're working all the way from preschoolers and young families all the way up through adults. The programs that we have in schools are absolutely amazing. I bet there is not a week that passes that we don't get 2 or 3 disclosures of kids coming up and say, I now believe that I can step up and say something about what's been happening to me. And so that then, the prevention programs actually lead to them coming to Juliette's house for an assessment. And that assessment includes everything from a medical exam to a forensic interview that's recorded because it's sometimes used in court
Right.
Against the alleged offender.
Sure. CASA, I would think.
We work closely with CASA. And then now we're so excited. Last November we hired a therapist so that a child can go directly from the assessment and within a week or 2 go directly into therapy. And they don't have to tell their story all over again because
Right.
our therapist has access to all those notes. They know exactly what's happened with this child. They know the history. They know the physical background from the wellness check that we do with them. And so it's so far more effective because we can intervene fast. We're using a program called trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
It's a very specialized program directed for kids who have been traumatized. But the beauty with the program is it works not only with the child, but whoever their caregiving family is around them.
Sure.
Now, it may be their biological family, it may be grandparents or aunts or uncles, it could be a foster family. Right. We don't know, but the idea is to help everyone involved to wrap around this child, help that child heal, but also to help that family heal.
Right.
Because child abuse never affects just the child.
Sure.
It's those concentric circles of concern
Right.
around them.
Right.
We're thrilled about that. And then if the child needs additional therapy, maybe we do it, maybe we refer them to Lutheran Community Services or Family and Youth with the county. It all depends on what is the specific instances for that child.
So that brings up a point. Are you guys mandatory reporters?
Absolutely we are. In my world, I wish every adult were a mandatory reporter.
Would you explain what that means?
The law lines out or stipulates that there are certain people in certain professions that have to be mandatory reporters,
Right.
which means if you see something suspicious, you have to report it to law enforcement or to the Department of Health, Human Services, Child Protective Services.
Sure.
So teachers and ministers and people that do the work that we do, therapists, school counselors.
Sure.
There's a long
It's
list.
a huge array.
And in fact, this year the legislature passed a law that emergency medical technicians have to be mandatory.
Oh, that's
reporters.
really great.
That's great. Because we are of the mind that because they're first responders, they may be going to the house to see because Uncle Charlie's had a heart attack.
Exactly.
But they're there and there's a big animal cage in the living room, but there are no pets.
Right.
What does that mean? So we want them to feel trained and empowered to go, okay, we're in this environment. Does everything look okay? Do the kids look well fed? Whatever the situation may be, they're prepared and empowered to make certain judgments.
Sure.
And then pass it over to those who actually do have the experience and the knowledge to make a full assessment.
Well, I love the fact that you're not re-traumatizing by making them restate their story
Yeah.
over and over.
That's so important.
It is, because with the wraparound services all coming into play, they only have to do it once.
Right.
And boy, to have to re-speak that over and over.
Well, and the truth is, we see many kids that the trauma may have occurred 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years earlier.
Sure.
And they're just now at a point in their life that they can talk about it. So we want to be there for them. We may see a child 2 or 3 times. The first time they come in, they may not want to talk about it. It's okay. We're not going to push you. We're here to help you, support you. We may recommend some therapy. We have a wonderful play therapy clinic at Juliette's house, which is a wonderful modality where people have seen this probably on television, where you use directed play to help them begin to overcome whatever barriers they're feeling, and maybe to begin to express what's actually happened to them. So we're thrilled about that. But we may have to see a child 2 or 3 times before they actually say, I can talk about it now. I feel strong enough that I can talk about what's happened.
That's really important. So, what is a little bit of history on Juliette's house?
We were in the early 90s, or about 93, a group of these people I was talking about, this grassroots movement of people, school counselors and Brad Berry, who was a DDA at the time, some law enforcement folks, some doctors, all came together and had this idea. And Molly Peterson was a school counselor here in town and teacher, and her husband was an attorney, John Peterson, who's still practicing here, fabulous man. They got directly involved in this program, really some of our founders. In fact, John was our chair for several years, chair of our board. John had 2 clients, Paul and Juliette Barber. Paul had done great in the lumber industry, and they were looking for a children's directed charity to do some work with. And John said, have I got a story for you? And they were so wonderful to us. Our building was actually originally an office building on the south side of town, not far from Linfield. And they said, you know what, we could tear that down and remodel it to be an effective center. And that's what they did. They tore it down to 2 walls, so it was just a remodel.
Wow.
Or a rebuild. And they built it out just so forward thinking. We were when they opened the doors in 97, ADA compliant. Have a nice conference room, a full kitchen attached to it, because even today we frequently will have meals with some of the trainings that we do. We want to make it as family oriented and as friendly as possible. You've been out there.
Yes.
Our building is bright yellow.
It's incredible.
You walk in the door, there's stuffed animals and blankets everywhere. Every child gets to pick out a stuffed animal and a blanket, which makes them, and even if they're there with siblings, their siblings get to pick out something, so that all of the family feels a part of this process, that there's no reason to be embarrassed, and to feel good about what you're doing, because they're already traumatized. They're into a system that's totally out of their realm of understanding. And we want to make it as easy for them as possible.
Well, I'm sure that even in that, just comprehending what they've been through is so difficult.
It is. It is.
So you recently lost one of your incredible employees.
We did.
To a wonderful foundation, Give a Little Foundation, Francine Fiore. I'm sure she's missed.
Oh, she's terribly missed. We love Francine, one of the finest grant writers I've ever worked with. She was so passionate about the work that we do. She was with us for 13 years. And then, the work that we do, even when you're not in the trenches, so to speak, directly, it gets to you because you hear the stories and you know it. And she needed a break from us for a while, but in typical Francine style, she went right back to work in the community and doing amazing work. And we miss her and we love her, and who knows, we may be able to work again one day.
I'm sure that you can,
And certainly with Give a Little Foundation, which does beautiful work in this community.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Like I said, I just feel so fortunate to work and live in a community that's so caring and so giving.
Well, it is super compassionate, and they really get behind things that are really important to them.
Absolutely.
And so that's unbelievable for a community. So recently, the mayor provided you guys, Juliette's house, from the city of McMinnville with a proclamation.
Absolutely. Well, and it wasn't just Mayor Hill. Every single town in this county made proclamations. The county commission made a proclamation.
Wow.
And the reason is every April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Right.
And we've been at this for quite a few years, and for some reason, something got triggered this year that communities, the flame got lit, and everybody came out and said, We want ribbons. We want pinwheels, which are the
Right.
big symbols, blue and silver pinwheels and blue ribbons. We want people to know that we support our children. We want to prevent child abuse, and we want the world to know about it. I mean, Carlton had their whole campaign, Carlton Goes Blue, that blue lights in the streets and all. They did fundraisers for us, had a wonderful opportunity of addressing every single city council about the importance of it. We're now working with them to talk about not only prevention and the importance of April, and we had
Right.
a wonderful billboard, if you saw that.
Yeah, I did.
But what do we do about it? Because that's where we really may hit the rubber hits the road.
Right,
When
exactly.
We don't just talk about the horrors and the trauma of child abuse. We talk about solutions. Because that's what people want to hear. They want to know that Joe Q Public, can do something to protect a child. So we've partnered with several organizations in the state, Ford Family Foundation, Spirit Mountain Community Fund,
Sure.
Collins Foundation, and several others, to really ramp up our prevention education work.
Right.
And so we do what's called Stewards of Children. Some people know it as Darkness to Light, which is the company that actually created this curriculum. And it's a 2-hour training program where people learn this is what child abuse looks like. And it's written in such a way that these video captures the stories of several adults who are adult survivors and what it was like for them going through. And
Right.
it's heart-wrenching.
I'm sure.
It really is. Because these were people who, at that stage, nobody intervened. And it was only later in life that people intervened and embraced them and helped them get the help that they need to start healing.
And some never received that.
Some never receive it, and they may end up on the streets. Although you could be a CEO of a corporation and be a drug abuser, have horrible relationships, all of it stemming from the same cause.
Sure.
But the program doesn't just leave you there. The training takes you through what does child abuse prevention look like.
Right.
So that ultimately our hope is that if we believe that there's a tipping point of about 5% of a community, and if we can reach that mark, educating 5%, then from that point on, child welfare, child safety gets woven into the fabric of a community.
Right.
So that every program that we're doing that involves children, let's say we're building the new gymnasium that's being built.
Right.
Architecturally, what are we doing to protect kids? Are the hallways safe? One of my staff members used to work for YMCA down in Roseburg. He went through this training a few years ago and realized, oh my gosh, our racquetball courts have no windows and they lock from the inside.
Oh boy.
And they're virtually soundproof.
Yeah.
What a perfect place to assault somebody.
Right.
So they raised some money, they got a concrete saw, they cut windows into it, and they removed the locks. Some of those simple things. So if a community is looking at those questions, they're saying, okay, architecturally, what are we doing to protect kids?
Right.
What are our policies and procedures? Are our staff and volunteers trained to know what to do to protect the children? And if something happens, do they know what they should do about it?
Right.
So that's the beauty of this program. It's not a be-all and end-all, but it's a wonderful starting point. For anybody who just says, you know, I love kids, maybe I'm a Sunday school teacher. Maybe my church needs to go back and think about some of these things. Maybe I'm a school teacher, a school counselor. Do we have all those policies and procedures? Schools now are very sophisticated. One of the dangers, though, as in anything like gun safety, even, you may think you know everything.
Yeah.
And then over time, you get a little bit lax, and you get a little bit lax.
That happens.
And then something happens.
Right.
We don't want anybody to get lax when it comes to the safety of children.
Right.
And we think if we build these layers within the community, there'll always be somebody that says, you know what, we haven't looked at those policies in a while, or maybe we're not fully following those policies.
Right.
I was working with a church not too long ago. They asked me to review their policies, and sure enough, they had in there how to report, but it was report up the chain within the church.
Sure.
And it went finally to the pastor, and my question was, and who does the pastor report to? I don't know. I said, well, let me tell you how this really should work. And so we talked about it, and they said, you know, that makes perfect sense. If I hear the story, if I see it, I'm the one who needs to call DHS.
Right.
And it may go nowhere. It may be a perfectly innocent situation. That's okay. You've done your part. and you've turned it over to professionals who then can start making some assessments of what may have actually happened with this child.
Well, that's due diligence, and that's
Absolutely.
really important as well.
Critically important.
Yep. So how are you guys funded?
Oh, a variety of ways. About a third of our funding comes from the state and through a federal pass-through. There are two major grant components with the state and with federal pass-through, both through the Department of Justice of the state. And they're funds that are filled out by victims of crime. So, for instance, if a drug dealer gets caught and prosecuted, and they've got a lot of cars and assets
Resources,
and so forth,
yeah.
all of that gets sold, and that money goes into this fund that then goes back into communities like McMinnville, like Yamhill County,
Right.
to support victim services. And we have an incredible advocate department here through the DA's office of victim services. Really does incredible work. I mean, Johnny on the spot when something happens. Yeah. But we get funded through that. There's a state fund similar to it, and the federal funds. So about a third of our funding comes from there. About another 30 to 40% is from private foundations like Ford Family,
Sure.
Spirit Mountain Community Fund, Collins, and some others. And then we have the rest is private donors, citizens that love our work. Some
Right.
of them have been through Juliette's house, but they love kids and they do great work. It gets expensive because we've grown our budget, almost doubled it in the 3 years that I've been there. Primarily because this community deserves it.
Right.
We've run Safe Kids in schools for 21 years now.
Yep.
Last year we had a big celebration with Dr. Russell here in
Right.
McMinnville. Michael Brott, who was the superintendent here for many years, was one of our early members of our movement, and insisted that we develop a program that empowered kids. Well, we've done that for so long, and when I came along, I said, we're educating 3,000 to 4,000 kids a year,
Yeah.
which is fabulous, but we can do more. Yeah. And where are the adults? We've got to get to the adults, and we've got to get to the older kids, because that's where kids start then protecting kids, particularly when you're talking about issues of consent.
Sure.
That's huge. That's huge, because we all know when adolescence hits and puberty comes, people don't think straight.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I remember anytime my eldest nephew would get in trouble, he would say, "Yes, Dad, I know, my brain's not fully formed yet." And then they'd work out whatever they needed to. But we know that happens. So if you can have some peer-to-peer support that says,
Right.
I'm going to look out for you, you look out for me, because something may happen, we're not thinking straight, or maybe we're at a party and you've gotten into some alcohol, which you shouldn't be getting into,
Sure.
but we want to be there to protect one another as
Right.
well as to protect ourselves.
Well, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And that's why I see part of our mission is really to fundamentally change how we look at kids,
Right.
and how we support one another, because none of this is rocket science.
None of it.
It's all about compassion. It's all about finding solutions and saying, you know what, I can do this. I can give a little more time. I'm now a little educated about what to do if I see something that makes me uncomfortable.
Sure.
If
What to look for,
What
sure.
to look for, signs. We have a whole part of our assessment is what are called suspicious physical injury.
Sure.
So a child shows up at schools with bruises that don't make sense. Kids always have bruises.
Right.
But these are bruises that look odd for some reason. So a teacher may call the counseling department. The counseling says, okay, we're going to call DHS. DHS goes over. They make an assessment, not sure what happens. So they'll take pictures.
Right.
They send those pictures to our medical director, Dr. Peg Miller,
Right.
and Rory Hartzell, who's a nurse practitioner
Yep.
in town. God, we love them. They do so great. Peg. She's been
Yeah.
in this community, a fabulous pediatrician. And they'll take a look at him and go, I don't know. I think we need to see this child because
Yeah.
something's going on here. Or they may go, you know what? That makes perfect sense, the explanation. But maybe we need to keep eyes on that child.
Yeah. So we've already almost run out of time. You have some slides, and if we could bring them
Sure.
up on the screen, maybe you could. Well, there's the sign.
There's our sign. That's right there in our front yard.
Yep.
We're over there by Linfield College, and it was deliberately just off the main highway so that people
Well,
had a
it's
sense of
perfect. Yeah.
privacy. but we're really, really happy with our campus.
Can you bring up the next one? Yep.
There's Dr. Peg,
Yep.
doing an exam.
With one of her plush animals.
But I think it goes to the fact that we're a very compassionate place.
Yes, you are.
And it's so gratifying. So many of the kids that come, before they leave, they're hugging the staff and they're saying, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yep.
The parents, which oftentimes are far more anxious than the kids, it's nice to see a smile on their face.
Yeah.
And to know that if they're going to go through therapy, they're coming right back to the same place that they like. Oh, this is a great group of kids down in Amity. During April, they helped us put up ribbons up and down the main street and pinwheels, and they had a ball. This is I believe it's the Senior Service Club from the high school.
Oh, I'm glad that they're learning early.
Oh,
that's awesome.
It's very important. Very important.
Ian?
And then St. James, one of our big targets for our program, Stewards of Children, is faith communities.
Sure.
Sadly, faith communities are ground zero for predators, so we really want those congregations to be well educated, informed, and we also know just talking about it, just having that awareness and knowing that awareness is in that community,
Right.
that keeps predators away.
Right, and most churches these days have what they call safe zones, and
Right.
2 adults have to be together.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You don't want to be alone with a child. That's
Yep.
that's not fair to that child. So this is a cute picture from the outside of St. James.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And this is our True Blue rally. Every April we do a rally. We meet on the steps of the county courthouse. This year, DA Brad Berry spoke. The sheriff spoke. Commissioner Mary Sterrett spoke, who has a deep compassion.
Yeah, I know.
Well, they all do. They're all great. And then we had signs, and we walked from the courthouse over to 3rd and down 3rd and then back up to the courthouse. And it's just a great way of bringing the community together. We had, I think, about 65, almost 70 people participate this year.
That's great.
Grows a little bit more every year. And we call it the True Blue Rally because we ask everybody to wear blue that day.
Oh, of course.
So, and we're trying to do it throughout the county. So whether you're in the rally or not, you're wearing blue that day.
That's fantastic.
This is one of our trainings. That's at Juliette's house in our conference center. That's Eli Cox leading the group.
Yep.
We have a number of we have companies come in. We've done parks and recreation groups.
Oh, good.
Online Northwest brought their entire staff. We're so happy, and they're just great supporters of Juliette's house. They said when they found out about this program, we want to get trained because we have people that go into homes all the time.
Oh, sure.
And we want them, well, just like EMS personnel.
Right.
We want those kinds of line workers to be well educated.
And you also want them to have the latest and the greatest information.
Absolutely.
So it's an upgrade to what they've possibly had before.
Absolutely. And they may never, ever have to make a report.
Right.
But we want them prepared if they do.
Right.
And then, this is a program I'm so happy about. We started 2 years ago a Hispanic outreach program we've always been open. We always use interpreters for our assessments, but from the prevention education side, we hadn't done enough, and so we really have made a concerted effort. We have several bilingual staff. We continue to hire more, and this is a program. The 2 ladies on the end of that picture are our staff, Lucy Diaz and Irma Del Rio. They literally go into the vineyards and talk with migrant workers there. We're trying to develop a program. So our next step is to get a grant that will bring in some real expertise
Right.
and help us develop a program. We can't find a program anywhere in the country that's working with migrant workers to prevent child abuse.
That's fantastic.
And domestic violence as well.
Thank you.
So we're working on that too. If you're interested in trainings, and I hope you are, that's the dates for Stewards of Children. Go to our website.
Sure.
We have new ones posted all the time.
And we have your Facebook page that has been launching all
Wonderful.
the time.
Wonderful.
And your website. So.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Howie.
And the last one, that's the information
That's
about...
how to get hold of us.
Right.
Great.
So
Thank
Russell,
you.
we have run out of time, as usual.
Doesn't take long.
It doesn't take long,
A lot to
does
talk
it?
about.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Russell,
so
for
much,
being
Howie.
on.
Really appreciate it.
We really appreciate you being on. And